We begin tonight with a dramatic escalation in U.S. policy toward Venezuela. President Donald Trump has confirmed that he has given the CIA permission to prepare covert operations against the government in Caracas. The announcement follows weeks of rising tensions with U.S. naval raids in the Caribbean and Venezuelan forces mobilizing at home. The move has drawn sharp reactions from Venezuela's disputed leader, Nicolas Maduro, who accuses Washington of reviving the era of CIA-backed coups in Latin America. Regional leaders are also weighing in, warning of the risk of intervention. Let's take a closer look at the unfolding standoff.
Signs of rising tensions in Venezuela. Armoured cars deployed in the capital Caracas on Wednesday as the government responds to further escalation in its standoff with the United States. That same day, President Trump confirmed he's authorized the CIA to prepare operations against Venezuela.
I authorized for two reasons, really. Number one, they have emptied their prisons into the United States of America. They came in through the they came in through the border. They came in because we had an open border policy. And the other thing are drugs. We have a lot of drugs coming in from Venezuela. And a lot of the Venezuelan drugs come in through the sea, so you get to see that. But we're going to stop them by land also.
The White House has not provided details about the potential operations, which were first reported by the New York Times. Trump also refused to answer whether the plans could involve removing Nicolas Maduro from power.
That's a ridiculous question for me to be given. Not really a ridiculous question, but wouldn't it be a ridiculous question for me to answer? But I think Venezuela's feeling heat.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro responded to the pressure by invoking Latin America's long-standing aversion to U.S. interventions, once thought to be a thing of the past.
How many more CIA coups? Latin America doesn't want them, doesn't need them, and rejects them.
From neighboring Colombia, President Gustavo Petro distanced himself from Maduro, but also warned of the consequences of any U.S. intervention. Meanwhile, Venezuela's government says it's preparing for the possibility of military intervention. In recent weeks, authorities have ordered military exercises and civilian training to defend against what they call a looming siege. The tensions follow a U.S. naval buildup in the Caribbean, which Washington insists is aimed at fighting drug trafficking. On Tuesday, Trump reported another operation near Venezuelan waters against a boat allegedly carrying narcotics. 6 people were killed. It was the 5th such raid since September.
DW correspondent Oscar Schlenker is with me in the studio now. He's reported from Venezuela for us many, many years. It's great to have you here in Berlin, Oscar. Let's walk back a second. Let's look at how we got here, because this is a major escalation, but this has been a long time coming.
Yes, well, the deterioration between the U.S. and Venezuela has gone way back since Hugo Chavez was president and George W. Bush. But we've seen a much intense escalation with the Obama administration that started implementing sanctions against Venezuela. We had started seeing before that already that the migration of Venezuelans, this giant exodus, the biggest one in the hemisphere's history, started to play out. Now, with Donald Trump's first administration, they stopped recognizing Maduro as a legitimate president in 2018 because of very undemocratic elections that were very much questioned back then. Yeah. And that has deteriorated to the point where there's no embassies, there's no U.S. embassy in Venezuela. There is absolutely no kind of negotiations going on. There was an intent this year of starting again talks and dialogues through Richard Grenell, but that fizzled out with this whole escalation of the conflict that we're seeing right now.
Yeah, Donald Trump has, of course, talked about this issue, and he says that he's ordered this because of 2 reasons. One, the Venezuelans have opened their prisons and sent their criminals to the U.S. and their drugs. Is there any evidence to back that up?
There is no evidence to back that up. What we have seen, that you have to take that with a grain of salt. What we have seen is that throughout this huge migration of people, there's over 9 million migrants that have left Venezuela because of the crisis and the political situation and the repression of the government as well. Well, through this large amount of people, there have been very violent gangs that have also migrated, and that has caused a lot of issues around the whole hemisphere, not only in the US, but also in Peru, in Ecuador, in Chile, in Argentina. We are seeing that these countries have been affected by this large criminal gang that is operating in these countries and also in the US. Yeah. So there is a certain truth to that. But it's not to the scale that Donald Trump maybe is promoting it as. And I think it's a way of justifying regime change in Venezuela. Everybody has said so, even the regime, and even Donald Trump to an extent. What we don't know is if it's a regime change that he wants or if it's a change in the regime.
Mm-hmm. Nicolas Maduro's legitimacy, and you mentioned it there, is very much disputed. I want to know how Venezuelans feel about what might be an attempt at regime change, foreign orchestrated, always a touchy subject, of course, especially in Latin America. What are Venezuelans saying about this? What are you hearing?
It's difficult to say inside of Venezuela because there is a lot of fear, but there's a lot of fear from the Maduro administration. We have seen a crackdown in dissent in Venezuela, and a lot of people are desperate for something to change, the regime to change, or a regime change, or something to come about that's different than what we've been living for the past 20 plus years. And we see that a lot of people do want change. There was a lot of hope injected into the opposition with the Nobel Peace Prize to Maria Corina Machado, who's the leading opposition leader. She's in hiding in Venezuela because her life is in danger if she discloses where she is. But we have seen that people in Venezuela do want change, and we have seen it with recent elections, and we saw it with last election as well. That has been very much disputed.
DW journalist Oscar Schlenker, so good to have you here. Thank you so much for all those insights.
Always a pleasure.
And let's keep talking with Mary Ellen O'Connell. She's an expert on international law with the University of Notre Dame in the US. Mary Ellen, welcome to DW. Now, Latin America has a long history of CIA-backed coups and covert operations. How does this latest move towards Venezuela fit into that record?
Well, not in a good way. As your reporter just said, everyone in Central and South America thought that the era of U.S. military interventions for these politically trumped-up reasons was over, that the U.S. was going to start following the rule of law. Jimmy Carter really put the country on a new track, and we were going to follow what the International Court of Justice ruled in our case against the case Nicaragua brought against the U.S. But it seems that President Trump is not reading history, not reading the law, and taking dramatic action because that's what his whim is of the moment.
Under international law, does the U.S. have any legal basis to authorize CIA operations inside Venezuela?
None whatsoever. It's absolutely true, as your reporter also said, that the Maduro regime is a dictatorship. It denies basic human rights. It should be opposed. But think of the irony of opposing an unlawful regime that is denying human rights, that's not ruling under any concept of the rule of law, by violating the law. President Trump has carried out unlawful killings in the Caribbean. Dozens of people are dead unlawfully, and now he's going to extend that in some way. Who knows what he means by covert action, but to use any military, law enforcement, CIA action on the territory of Venezuela without the consent of the current person in control, and that is Maduro, is an utter, clear violation of international law. Mm-hmm. There are peaceful means using cooperation of the community in the region, of the world, to promote human rights, to move steadily and in a grounded, successful way toward peace and reconciliation and building a regime under law and democracy in Venezuela. We have plenty of patterns on how to do that. We have how Germany finally rejoined, became one nation through the Velvet Revolution, groundwork done at the grassroots to bring democracy throughout Eastern Europe and the Soviet sphere. That's how it should happen in Venezuela, not with violence, not with fabricated drama by President Trump for his domestic political reasons.
I want to zoom in on one of the justifications that the Trump administration or Trump himself is giving for this. He says this is about drug cartels, which his administration has labeled terrorist organizations. Legally, does that change the picture at all, or is this all political rhetoric?
The UN Charter is absolutely clear. That's the law that governs resort to military force, the naval vessels with missiles, or a CIA agent acting on the territory of another state without the permission of that state. The UN Charter, it has two clear principles. No right to use military force unless the state is being attacked by another state with significant military force in the first instance. And there's a principle of non-intervention in the internal affairs of other states. So if President Maduro wants help from the US in handling the serious problem of drug trafficking that emanates from Venezuela, then he can ask for it. But the US can't take that matter into its own hands. So those are the clear rules. Drug dealing is a crime. Drug trafficking is a crime. The US has actually been dealing very successfully with cooperation of countries in the region and using the Coast Guard, which is a law enforcement agency, not a military force agency. And President Trump has pushed that all aside. Honestly, it looks like it's part and parcel of his whole attempt to create the sense of emergency and fear in the US. He's sending federal troops to respond to these exaggerated claims of crisis in cities like Chicago and Los Angeles owing to migration. All Western countries have serious migration challenges.
Yeah.
We are not going to solve them with military force.
I'd like to ask, because we've talked about plenty that this is not the first time the CIA has been given orders to intervene in a foreign country in a covert manner, but it is quite unusual for a U.S. president to openly admit to it, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Of course, it's counterintuitive to say it's a covert action, but to announce it publicly. So
Exactly.
We're not going to call it a covert action anymore. It's part of how President Trump has been governing since he was inaugurated in January. He likes drama. He likes a big show. And he feels that he can counter some of the opposition he faces, some of the decline in the polls, some of the complaints about how he's handling the economy if he keeps making dramatic actions. His base wants to see action against migrants. And in part, that's because he's built up the migration issues in the US to such an extent for his base. That's how he operates. But there is no, if his advisors would help him see what history has taught in terms of US unlawful intervention in Central and South America, in the Caribbean, it has never worked for the success of the US or the countries involved. The very problem of migration that he keeps pointing to and raising the alarm about sending federal troops, that problem is owing to US interference in countries trying to create democracies, prosperity, so they're not turning to drug dealing and other unlawful actions.
We'll have to leave it there. That was Mary Ellen O'Connell with the University of Notre Dame. Thanks so much.
Thank you.